I stood in my childhood bedroom doorway as my mother, Patricia, screamed, "You're just a leech living off us!" Her voice cracked with venom. My overnight bag hit the wall with a dull thud, clothes spilling across the hardwood floor. "Go somewhere else," she added, her face twisted with rage I'd never seen before. My father, Robert, stood silently behind his wife, avoiding my eyes like a guilty child. For 2 years, I'd been secretly managing their finances business and caring for my ailing grandmother upstairs while working 60 hours a week. But they saw only the daughter who'd moved back home after college. I turned and left without revealing the truth that would destroy them. I drove through the familiar streets of suburban Cincinnati, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as I headed toward my best friend Sarah's apartment downtown. The radio played some mindless pop song, but all I could hear were my mother's words echoing in my head. Leech. The irony burned through my chest like acid. For 24 months, I'd been the invisible architect of their entire existence. Every morning at 5 a.m. before heading to my job as a financial analyst at Henderson & Associates, I'd check their bank accounts on my laptop. I'd balance their checkbook, pay their utilities, manage their credit card bills, and transfer money from my savings account whenever they fell short, which happened monthly. My father's landscaping business, Sunset Gardens, was hemorrhaging money due to his complete inability to manage anything beyond the actual yard work. Robert could transform a barren lot into paradise, but he couldn't send an invoice on time to save his life. So I did it. Every evening after my 10-hour workday, I'd log into his business email and respond to client inquiries, schedule seasonal services, negotiate contracts, and handle billing disputes. His customers thought he was incredibly organized and professional. They had no idea his 28-year-old daughter was running the entire administrative side of his company while eating dinner at the kitchen table. The medical appointments alone were a full-time job. Grandmother Catherine lived in the converted bedroom upstairs, her diabetes requiring constant monitoring. I coordinated with her endocrinologist, cardiologist, and podiatrist. I managed 8 different medications with precise timing schedules. I tracked her blood sugar levels, planned her diabetic-friendly meals, and drove her to physical therapy twice weekly. My parents saw only an old woman who occasionally needed help, completely unaware that Catherine would have been hospitalized or worse without my invisible caregiving. Then there were the investments. Last year, I discovered my father had been putting their retirement savings into high-risk penny stocks based on tips from his golf buddy. I quietly transferred the remaining funds into conservative index funds and started rebuilding their portfolio. I prepared their taxes each April, finding deductions they never knew existed. I researched and purchased their car insurance, homeowners, insurance, and health insurance policies during open enrollment periods. The spreadsheets on my laptop told the real story. Emergency plumbing repair, $500 from my checking account. Grandmother's prescription, copays $140 monthly from my credit card. Business liability insurance, $300 quarterly that Robert forgot existed. Mortgage payment shortfall. $600 I'd transferred just last month when a major client paid late. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Doors unlocked, wine is chilled, tissues are ready." She knew me well enough to understand that my sudden request to crash at her place meant family drama had reached critical mass. As I pulled into the parking garage beneath her downtown loft building, I calculated the financial reality my parents were about to face. Without my monthly $500 safety net, their checking account would overdraft within 10 days. Without my administrative management, my father's business would collapse within 2 weeks. Without my caregiving coordination, Grandmother Catherine would miss medications and appointments within 3 days. They called me a leech, while I literally kept them alive and solvent. The word choice was particularly cruel because I'd been the one absorbing their financial shortfalls like a sponge, not the other way around. Every dollar they accused me of taking, I'd actually given them 10 in return through direct payments, administrative labor, and crisis management. Sarah met me at her apartment door with a glass of Pinot Grigio and knowing eyes. She'd watched me juggle my demanding career with my family's endless needs for months, often working until midnight on my laptop, while she relaxed on her couch. "What finally happened?" she asked as I collapsed onto her spare bedroom bed. "They think I'm useless," I said, accepting the wine gratefully. A burden, a leech living off their generosity. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "The same leech who paid their electric bill last month when it was about to get shut off." "The very same." "This should be interesting," she said with a grim smile. "How long do you think before reality hits?" I pulled out my laptop and showed her the financial tracking spreadsheet I'd maintained religiously for 2 years. Color-coded cells showed their income expenses, my contributions, and projected shortfalls. Based on their current spending patterns and my father's business cash flow, they'll start feeling the pinch within 72 hours, total crisis mode within 3 weeks. Sarah studied the screen, her expression growing more serious with each line item. "Emma, this is insane. You've been subsidizing their entire lifestyle while they treated you like a freeloader. Welcome to my world." I closed the laptop and finished my wine in 2 large swallows. But not anymore. Tomorrow I start apartment hunting. It's time I learned what it feels like to spend my money on myself for once. For the first time in 2 years, I went to sleep without setting 5 different alarms to manage other people's responsibilities. The silence felt foreign and wonderful. 3 days into my exile at Sarah's apartment, my phone buzzed with the first hint of trouble, a text from my father. "Do you know where the Henderson contract files are? Can't find them anywhere." I stared at the message while eating breakfast at Sarah's granite kitchen counter. The Henderson contract was worth $12,000 in seasonal landscaping services, their biggest annual client. The files were organized alphabetically in the home office filing cabinet I'd set up along with contact information service schedules and payment history I'd maintained for 18 months. I deleted the text without responding. By noon, 3 more messages arrived. "Washing machine making weird noise. Who do we call? Insurance company wants some form. What form? Mom can't figure out which pills Grandma takes in the morning." Each question represented hours of invisible labor I'd performed without recognition. I'd researched appliance repair services and negotiated service calls. I'd organized insurance paperwork and handled claims. I'd created detailed medication charts with pictures and timing schedules for Grandmother Catherine's complex prescription regimen. Sarah found me staring at my phone during lunch. "Buyer's remorse?" she asked, unwrapping her turkey sandwich. "Watching the dominoes fall?" I replied, showing her the growing list of messages. "It's like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion." That evening, my phone rang. Patricia's contact photo filled the screen, a smiling family portrait from last Christmas where I'd been cropped to barely visible in the corner. I let it go to voicemail. "Emma, honey, we're having some technical difficulties. The internet stopped working, and your father has that big presentation tomorrow. Can you swing by and take a look? We'd really appreciate it." Technical difficulties. The internet bill was $49 monthly, automatically charged to a credit card I managed. Without my oversight, the payment had failed when their primary account went into overdraft. 3 days without internet meant Robert missed email communications from potential clients and couldn't access his project planning software. I didn't call back. By Friday morning, the situation escalated. Sarah's apartment buzzer rang at 7 a.m. Through the intercom, I heard my father's voice, strained and desperate. Emma, are you there? We really need to talk. Sarah padded to the intercom in her bathrobe. She's not available right now, Mr. Davidson. Would you like to leave a message? Please tell her the business email isn't working. I missed 3 client calls this week. The Henderson project starts Monday, and I can't find any of the paperwork. I listened from the bedroom, my heart simultaneously breaking and hardening. Robert's landscaping skills were exceptional, but his organizational abilities were non-existent. For 2 years, I'd been his invisible business manager, maintaining client databases, scheduling equipment deliveries, and ensuring project timelines stayed on track. His excellent reputation was built on my administrative foundation. That afternoon, while reviewing quarterly reports at my actual job, I received a call from Riverside Medical Center. This is Janet from Dr. Peterson's office. Catherine Davidson missed her appointment this morning and we haven't heard from anyone. Is she all right? My grandmother's endocrinology appointment. I'd been managing her medical schedule through a complex calendar system coordinating transportation and ensuring she had recent lab work before each visit. Missing appointments meant medication adjustments would be delayed, potentially causing dangerous blood sugar fluctuations. I'm sorry, but I'm no longer managing Mrs. Davidson's care, I told Janet. You'll need to contact her daughter Patricia at this number. I provided my mother's cell phone, knowing Patricia had no idea such appointments existed. The weekend brought escalated chaos. My parents' neighbor Margaret knocked on Sarah's door Saturday morning, looking concerned. Emma? Dear, your mother asked me to check if you were here. She seems quite frantic about something with your grandmother. Through Margaret, I learned that grandmother Catherine had become confused and agitated when her morning medication routine changed. Without my detailed schedule, Patricia had been guessing at pill timing and dosages. Catherine's blood sugar had spiked dangerously Thursday night, requiring a 3 a.m. emergency room visit that resulted in an $800 bill they couldn't afford. Your mother mentioned the strangest thing, Margaret continued. She said all sorts of things started breaking down right after you left. Almost like you were some kind of good luck charm, keeping everything running smoothly. Good luck charm? If only she knew how many hours of meticulous planning went into creating their luck. Sunday evening, I sat on Sarah's balcony overlooking downtown Cincinnati, watching the sunset paint the Ohio River gold and orange. For the first time in months, I'd spent an entire weekend focused solely on my own needs. I'd gone shopping for clothes that fit properly instead of whatever was cheapest. I'd read a novel from beginning to end without interruption. I'd had long, uninterrupted conversations with Sarah about her career, her relationships, her dreams. The absence of constant crisis management felt like emerging from underwater. I could breathe again. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 unread text messages from various family members. I turned it off and opened a bottle of wine Sarah had been saving for a special occasion. Independence. I decided was special enough. The first week of freedom was ending, and the real chaos hadn't even begun yet. Monday morning arrived with a jarring phone call that shattered my peaceful new routine. Sarah answered her landline while I was getting ready for work, her face growing pale as she listened. Emma, it's Riverside Hospital. Your grandmother was brought in by ambulance early this morning. I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking. The nurse explained that Patricia had found Catherine unconscious in the bathroom at 2 a.m., her blood glucose levels dangerously low. The paramedics managed to stabilize her, but she was admitted for overnight observation and comprehensive diabetes management review. At the hospital, I found my family clustered around Catherine's bed, looking lost and panicked. My grandmother was conscious, but weak, her normally sharp eyes clouded with confusion. Patricia's face was streaked with tears and exhaustion. Dr. Rodriguez, Catherine's attending physician, approached with a thick medical file. "Are you Emma Davidson? I've been hoping to speak with you. Your grandmother has been remarkably well managed for the past 2 years. Her A1C levels, medication compliance, and overall diabetic control have been textbook perfect. But something changed drastically this past week." He showed us charts documenting Catherine's blood sugar readings, medication schedules, and dietary management. Every entry for the previous 24 months showed consistent professional-level care. The past week showed dangerous spikes, missed medications, and dietary chaos. "Someone has been providing exceptional diabetes management for Mrs. Davidson," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "I have consultation notes in her file from regular check-ins with a family member who understood her condition better than most medical professionals. The caller always knew her exact medication timing, recent symptoms, and dietary concerns." Patricia stared at me with growing horror. "That was you. You've been talking to her doctors." "Every month for 2 years," I said quietly. "Coordinating her care, managing her medications, scheduling her appointments, tracking her blood sugar patterns, planning her meals according to Dr. Peterson's dietary guidelines." Dr. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Davidson's care has been exemplary. However, this week's management appears to have been handled by someone without medical knowledge. Wrong medication timing, inappropriate food choices, missed insulin doses. She's lucky to be alive." Robert slumped into a chair beside Catherine's bed. "We had no idea. We thought she was just taking some pills and eating regular food." "Diabetes management is complex," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "Mrs. Davidson requires precise medication timing, careful dietary balance, regular blood glucose monitoring, and immediate response to symptoms. Someone has been providing professional-level caregiving. Without that support, she's at serious risk for diabetic coma, kidney failure, or worse." The conversation was interrupted by Robert's phone, ringing loudly. He stepped into the hallway to answer, returning minutes later with his face ashen. "That was Tom Henderson. He's canceling our contract. Says we've been unresponsive and unprofessional. That's $12,000 gone." Tom Henderson had been one of my father's most important clients for 3 years. I'd maintained detailed communication with his property manager, coordinated seasonal service schedules, and ensured prompt responses to special requests. Without my administrative support, Robert had missed emails, failed to return calls, and couldn't locate project specifications. "There's more," Robert continued miserably. "The bank called. Our business account is overdrawn. The automatic equipment loan payment bounced, and they're threatening to repossess the trailer and mowers." I'd been monitoring their business cash flow religiously, transferring personal funds to cover shortfalls, and managing payment timing to avoid overdrafts. Without my financial oversight, Robert's irregular income couldn't support their fixed expenses. Patricia's phone buzzed with a text message that made her gasp. "The mortgage company. They want to know why last month's payment was returned for insufficient funds." Last month's mortgage payment. I'd covered it with a direct transfer from my savings account when Robert's biggest spring project payment was delayed. My parents never knew how close they'd come to foreclosure because I'd quietly resolved the crisis. Dr. Rodriguez observed our family drama with professional detachment. "I'm going to recommend home health services for Mrs. Davidson. She needs skilled diabetes management, and whoever was providing that care previously is no longer available." The cost of professional home health services was substantial, requiring skilled nursing visits 3 times weekly, plus emergency support. Insurance would cover only a portion, leaving them with monthly expenses they couldn't afford. As we left the hospital that evening, my family's financial reality was becoming undeniable. Robert's business was failing without administrative support. Their household management was collapsing without my invisible coordination. Grandmother Catherine needed expensive professional care because I was no longer providing it for free. Sarah picked me up from the hospital parking lot, taking one look at my exhausted face before driving straight to our favorite Thai restaurant. Over pad Thai and spring rolls, I recounted the day's revelations. "So they're finally discovering what you actually do," she said, poking at her food thoughtfully. "What I did," I corrected. "Past tense. I'm not going back to being their unpaid life manager." "Even for your grandmother?" The question hit me hard. Catherine was innocent in all this, a sweet woman who'd always treated me with kindness and respect. Watching her suffer because of my parents' ignorance felt cruel. "I'll figure out how to help Grandma without enabling my parents," I said finally. "But I'm not returning to that house. I won't be their invisible servant while being called a leech." That night, I researched professional caregiving services and found a reputable company that specialized in diabetes management. It would cost my parents $3,000 monthly money they didn't have, but it would provide better care than I ever could with medical training and professional oversight. I also updated my resume and started browsing apartment listings seriously. The time for temporary refuge at Sarah's place was ending. It was time to build my own life on my own terms. 3 weeks after leaving my parents' house, I was reviewing quarterly investment portfolios at my office when my phone buzzed with a text that made my blood run cold. The message was from Robert, sent at 11:37 on a Tuesday morning. "Why can't we access our bank?" I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold, as I absorbed the implications. Their primary checking account had been frozen, probably due to suspicious activity or overdraft violations. For 2 years, I'd been managing their online banking through secure passwords and monitoring systems, preventing exactly this kind of crisis. I typed back the response that had been building in my chest for 3 weeks. "Ask the Leech." Within minutes, my phone erupted with calls and messages. I turned it off and focused on my actual job, the one that paid my salary and offered opportunities for advancement. For the first time in months, I completed a full day's work without a single family emergency interrupting my concentration. That evening, Sarah greeted me with a bottle of wine and a grim expression. "Your dad called my office. He sounded desperate." "What did he want?" "Help accessing their bank accounts. Apparently they're locked out of everything and bills are bouncing left and right." The banking situation was entirely predictable. I'd been managing their online access through a complex system of automatic payments and balance monitoring. Without my oversight, failed transactions triggered security protocols that froze their accounts pending verification. Getting access restored would require documentation proof of identity and possibly legal intervention. "There's more," Sarah continued, pouring generous glasses of Pinot Grigio. "I drove past your grandmother's house today. There's a foreclosure notice posted on the front door." Foreclosure. The word hit me like a physical blow. I'd been quietly managing their mortgage payments for 18 months, covering shortfalls from my personal savings whenever Robert's business income fluctuated. Without my financial intervention, they'd apparently missed multiple payments. My laptop showed the full scope of the disaster through news alerts and public records. Robert's business license had been suspended for unpaid taxes and missing documentation. Their homeowner's insurance had lapsed due to non-payment. Utility companies had issued final disconnection notices for electricity, gas, and water services. The health insurance crisis was worse than I'd anticipated. Patricia's part-time job at Morrison's Bakery provided minimal coverage that excluded grandmother Catherine as a dependent. I'd been paying premiums directly through a private insurance company to ensure Catherine's medical care remained uninterrupted. Without those payments, her coverage had lapsed just as her medical needs increased. Wednesday morning brought news that made me sick to my stomach. Margaret, their neighbor, called to report that grandmother Catherine had been readmitted to the hospital in diabetic crisis. Without proper medication management and dietary control, her blood sugar levels had become life-threatening. "Your mother seems completely overwhelmed," Margaret said gently. "She's been calling Catherine's doctors, but they say all the medical records and emergency contacts are listed under your name." I'd spent 2 years building relationships with Catherine's medical team, attending appointments, and ensuring seamless care coordination. The doctors trusted my reports and relied on my detailed symptom tracking. Without that communication bridge, Catherine's care had fragmented dangerously. The business disaster accelerated rapidly. Robert's remaining clients began canceling contracts when equipment deliveries failed to arrive and scheduled services were missed. His reputation, carefully built over 15 years and maintained through my administrative support, crumbled within days. The final blow came Thursday afternoon, when Robert's truck was repossessed from the hospital parking lot while he visited Catherine. The vehicle loan had been managed through automatic payments from his business account, which had been frozen for insufficient funds. Without transportation, his landscaping business effectively ceased to exist. I found myself torn between satisfaction at their recognition of my value and genuine concern for the human suffering involved. Grandmother Catherine was innocent, a victim of my parents' ignorance and pride. Her health deterioration felt like collateral damage in a war I'd never wanted to fight. That evening, I made a decision that felt both compassionate and strategic. I called Riverside Medical Center and spoke directly with Dr. Rodriguez about Catherine's care options. "I want to arrange private pay home health services for my grandmother," I told him. "Professional diabetes management, 3 visits weekly, 24-hour emergency support. Send the bills directly to me." The cost would be significant, approximately $3,000 monthly from my savings. But Catherine would receive better care than I could provide with medical training and professional oversight. More importantly, it would demonstrate my continued love for my grandmother while maintaining firm boundaries with my parents. Dr. Rodriguez was delighted. "This level of care will give Mrs. Davidson the best possible management of her condition. However, the family should understand that professional services come with professional standards. There will be strict medication protocols, dietary requirements, and regular medical oversight." Perfect. My parents would finally understand the complexity of care I'd been providing invisibly for 2 years. Friday brought the text message I'd been expecting since the day I left. "Please come home. We need you. Everything is falling apart." I read Patricia's message while sitting in my new apartment, which I'd secured with the first month's rent and security deposit that previously would have gone toward their mortgage payment. The space was small, but entirely mine, decorated with furniture I'd chosen and paid for, without considering anyone else's needs or preferences. I typed back a single word, "No." The freedom felt intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Saturday morning arrived with frantic pounding on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing in the hallway, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and her eyes red from crying. She'd clearly been awake most of the night, probably trying to solve problems she didn't understand. "Emma, please open the door. We need to talk." I opened the door but remained in the doorway, not inviting her inside. Patricia looked around my small apartment with obvious surprise, taking in the tasteful furniture and organized space. "This is nice," she said grudgingly, "but you belong at home with family." "I belong where I'm valued," I replied calmly. That's here. Patricia's composure cracked immediately. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she launched into a desperate monologue about family responsibility and forgiveness. She promised I could have more freedom if I returned to help save them from financial ruin. She offered to pay me a small allowance for household help, completely missing the irony that I'd been subsidizing their lifestyle with my own money. You can set your own schedule, she pleaded. Maybe just help with the important stuff. The bank situation, your father's business, your grandmother's care. We'll give you space. The offer was insulting in its ignorance. She still viewed my 2 years of comprehensive life management as occasional help with simple tasks. She had no understanding of the complexity or time investment required to maintain their household, manage Robert's business, and coordinate Catherine's medical care. I won't return to being an unpaid servant while being called a leech, I said firmly. If you need professional services, hire professionals. Patricia's pleading turned to anger when I refused to negotiate. You're being selfish. Family helps family. Your grandmother is in the hospital because you abandoned us. Grandmother Catherine is in the hospital because you don't know how to manage diabetes, I corrected. I've arranged professional care for her that's far better than anything I could provide. She'll be fine. Patricia's face flushed with rage. Professional care with whose money we can't afford that? With mine. I'm paying for her care directly because I love her and want her healthy. This revelation clearly hadn't occurred to Patricia. She'd assumed I would either return to provide free care or Catherine would simply suffer. The idea that I might invest my own resources in professional solutions while maintaining personal boundaries was completely foreign to her thinking. The conversation ended badly with Patricia storming off after accusing me of tearing the family apart through stubbornness and selfishness. I closed the door and made coffee, feeling emotionally drained but resolute. Monday brought a new manipulation attempt. My supervisor at Henderson & Associates, Marcus Walsh, called me into his office with a puzzled expression. I had an interesting call this morning, Marcus said, settling behind his mahogany desk. A man claiming to be your father called our main line saying there was a family emergency and demanding to speak with you immediately. Robert had tried to manipulate me through my workplace, probably hoping to pressure me into responding to family emergencies during business hours. The tactic was both desperate and deeply inappropriate. He seemed quite agitated, Marcus continued. Something about bank accounts and medical situations. I told him we don't allow personal business during work hours unless it's a genuine emergency. Was this legitimate? Marcus and I had developed a strong professional relationship over the past year. He'd noticed my exceptional organizational skills and analytical abilities, offering me increasing responsibilities and hinting at promotion opportunities. The last thing I needed was family drama affecting my career prospects. It's a complicated situation, I explained carefully. My family is dealing with some financial and medical challenges, but there's no actual emergency. I've set clear boundaries about when and how they can contact me. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Family situations can be tricky. For what it's worth, you've shown remarkable professionalism and competence here. Whatever's happening in your personal life, don't let it undermine the excellent work you're doing professionally. His support meant more than he could know. For 2 years, my professional development had been stunted by constant family crises, interrupting my focus and energy. Having a supervisor who valued my abilities and protected my workspace felt like a revelation. The manipulation attempts escalated throughout the week. Patricia recruited my Aunt Linda to call and guilt me into returning home. Linda, however, had grown suspicious of Patricia's version of events after hearing about my sudden departure and the family's subsequent chaos. Something doesn't add up, Linda told me during our phone conversation. Patricia says you just left without warning, but she also says everything started falling apart the moment you walked out the door. How does that work if you were supposedly just a burden? I explained the situation honestly, detailing my years of invisible labor and financial contributions. Linda listened with growing amazement and anger. You've been supporting them financially while they called you a leech. Linda's voice rose with indignation. That's not family dynamics, Emma. That's exploitation. Linda not only refused to pressure me into returning, but offered financial support if I needed help establishing my independence. She also promised to have some direct conversations with Patricia and Robert about their treatment of me. The final manipulation attempt came Thursday evening in the form of a dramatic voicemail from Patricia threatening suicide if I didn't return to help save the family. The message was clearly designed to trigger my guilt and fear, forcing me to choose between my boundaries and their safety. Instead of capitulating, I called emergency services and requested a wellness check at my parents' address. I provided the dispatcher with details about Patricia's mental health threats and asked them to connect the family with appropriate counseling and social services resources. 2 hours later, Patricia called back furious that police and paramedics had arrived at the house to check on her well-being. How dare you send strangers to our home? I took your suicide threat seriously and responded appropriately. I replied calmly. If you're experiencing mental health crisis, you need professional help, not manipulation tactics. The wellness check had an unexpected benefit. The responding officers documented the family's living conditions, financial stress, and medical situation. They connected Patricia and Robert with social services resources, financial counseling programs, and mental health support services that could actually help them rebuild their lives independently. By the end of the week, the manipulation attempts had completely backfired. Instead of pressuring me to return, they demonstrated exactly why maintaining boundaries was necessary for my well-being. Professional support systems were now in place to help my family learn essential life management skills they should have developed years ago. I spent the weekend apartment shopping for a larger place using money I'd previously spent on their emergencies to invest in my own future for the first time in years. 6 weeks after leaving my parents' house, the full consequences of their financial mismanagement became brutally apparent. The foreclosure process moved forward relentlessly, forcing Patricia and Robert to pack their belongings into boxes and prepare for eviction from the home where they'd lived for 15 years. Margaret called to update me on the neighborhood drama. There's been a moving truck at your parents' house for 3 days, she reported with obvious concern. They're loading everything into storage because they found a tiny apartment across town. Your father looks like he's aged 10 years. The apartment Patricia and Robert found was a cramped 2-bedroom unit in a run-down complex near the airport. The rent was half their former mortgage payment, but the neighborhood was questionable, and the living space was claustrophobic compared to their former 4-bedroom colonial home. They'd lost most of their furniture because it wouldn't fit in the smaller space. Robert's business officially closed after the Ohio Department of Commerce suspended his landscaping license for unpaid taxes and missing documentation. The paperwork I'd meticulously maintained for 2 years had been scattered and lost during the chaos of recent weeks. Reconstructing the records would take months and cost thousands in legal fees they couldn't afford. Without his business, Robert struggled to find steady employment. His work history showed 15 years of self-employment, but no recent experience as an employee. Most landscaping companies hired seasonal workers in spring and summer was ending. He eventually found part-time work at a garden center for $12 an hour, a devastating reduction from his previous income. Patricia's situation at Morrison's Bakery deteriorated rapidly due to frequent absences and emotional instability. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, had initially been understanding about family crises, but Patricia's inability to focus on work tasks and tendency to break down crying during customer interactions became problematic. "I'm sorry, but we need reliable employees," Mrs. Chen explained when she called to inform me that Patricia had been terminated. "She's missed 12 shifts in 3 weeks and made several significant mistakes with special orders. We can't continue." The job loss eliminated their last source of steady income and health insurance coverage. They applied for unemployment benefits and food assistance, discovering a bureaucratic maze that I could have navigated efficiently, but they found overwhelmingly complex. Grandmother Catherine's recovery progressed beautifully under professional care management. The skilled nursing service I'd arranged provided expert diabetes control medication, oversight, and nutritional planning. Catherine's blood sugar levels stabilized, her energy improved, and her mental clarity returned to normal. The professional caregivers also educated Catherine about her condition in ways I'd never been trained to do. She learned to recognize symptoms, understand her dietary restrictions, and participate actively in her care management. The investment was expensive, but transformative. Catherine began expressing anger toward Patricia and Robert for their treatment of me, finally understanding the complexity of care I'd provided invisibly for years. During family visits at her assisted living facility, she openly criticized their behavior and praised my decision to prioritize my own well-being. These conversations damaged my parents' reputation throughout their social circle. Friends who'd initially sympathized with their ungrateful daughter's problem began questioning the true dynamics of our family situation. Several people approached me independently to express support for my decision and criticism of my parents' behavior. The community response was particularly devastating for Patricia, who'd always maintained a carefully crafted image as a devoted mother and responsible family member. Learning that people viewed her as exploitative and ungrateful shattered her social standing in ways that felt permanent. Robert attempted one final desperate measure to contact me through legal channels. He consulted with a family law attorney about compelling financial support from adult children, convinced that I owed them assistance based on their years of providing housing and food during my childhood. The attorney David Morrison apparently laughed out loud at Robert's proposal. "Adult children have no legal obligation to support their parents unless the parents are disabled and destitute through no fault of their own," Morrison explained. Furthermore, if your daughter was providing financial support voluntarily and you terminated that arrangement by ejecting her from your home, you have no grounds for legal complaint. Morrison suggested Robert focus his energy on rebuilding his life through legitimate employment and financial counseling rather than pursuing frivolous legal action against the daughter who'd actually been supporting them. Meanwhile, my own life flourished in ways I'd never imagined possible. The promotion I'd been hoping for at Henderson and Associates finally materialized, bringing a substantial salary increase and recognition for the analytical skills I'd been developing, while my parents thought I was unemployed or underemployed. Marcus Walsh had become not only my supervisor, but a genuine mentor offering guidance about career advancement and professional development opportunities. "You have exceptional organizational abilities and financial acumen," he told me during my performance review. "Have you considered pursuing your MBA? The company offers tuition assistance for promising employees." Graduate school. The idea had been a distant fantasy while I managed family crises daily. Now it seemed achievable and exciting, representing investments in my future that would pay dividends for decades. I also began dating seriously for the first time since college. A colleague from our Cincinnati branch office, David Martinez, had asked me to dinner several times before I felt emotionally available for a relationship. Our first date lasted 4 hours, talking about everything from investment strategies to travel dreams. "You seem so grounded and independent," David observed over coffee at a downtown cafe. "It's refreshing to meet someone who has her life together." If only he knew how recently that had become true. The 8th week of independence brought unexpected news that felt like cosmic justice. My grandfather's estate, which had been tied up in probate court for 3 years, finally settled with a surprise inheritance of $28,000 coming directly to me. The money had been intended for my education and future designated specifically in my grandfather's will. My parents had known about the inheritance, but assumed it would be combined with family resources for shared benefit, meaning my financial support of their lifestyle. Instead, the inheritance provided security for graduate school, a down payment on a home, and financial independence that felt like winning the lottery. For the first time in my adult life, I had genuine wealth that belonged entirely to me. The irony was perfect. My parents had called me a leech while I subsidized their existence, and now I'd inherited money they'd counted on receiving themselves. I celebrated the inheritance by enrolling in evening MBA classes at the University of Cincinnati and putting a down payment on a beautiful one-bedroom condominium in the trendy, over-the-Rhine district. The mortgage payment was less than my previous contributions to my parents' household expenses. Freedom, I discovered, was even more addictive than I'd anticipated. 8 months after walking out of my childhood home, I stood in the marble lobby of Henderson & Associates, wearing a tailored navy suit and holding my newly printed business cards, reading Emma Davidson's Senior Financial Analyst. The promotion had come with a corner office, a 30% salary increase, and oversight of major corporate accounts that challenged my abilities in exactly the ways I'd craved. My evenings were spent in MBA classes at the University of Cincinnati, where professors praised my practical knowledge of financial management and organizational systems. The skills I'd developed managing family chaos translated beautifully into corporate strategy and business analysis. My classmates often sought my help with budgeting projects and case study solutions. The condominium in Over-the-Rhine had become my sanctuary, decorated in soothing blues and grays with furniture. I'd chosen purely based on personal preference rather than durability or cost-effectiveness. The mortgage payment was manageable. The neighborhood was walkable and vibrant, and having space that belonged entirely to me still felt miraculous every morning. David Martinez had become a significant part of my new life, our relationship developing slowly and thoughtfully, without the constant interruption of family emergencies. He appreciated my independence and supported my educational goals, often studying alongside me at my kitchen table while I worked on MBA assignments. "You're the most self-sufficient person I know," he told me one evening as we walked along the Ohio River. "I've never dated anyone who had such clear boundaries and personal direction." The boundaries he admired had been forged through necessity and pain, but they'd become the foundation of my authentic self-worth. I no longer confused being needed with being valued, and I'd learned the difference between helping others and enabling their dysfunction. Grandmother Catherine thrived in her assisted living community, her diabetes perfectly managed by professional staff who treated her medical needs with appropriate seriousness and expertise. Her mental clarity and energy levels had improved dramatically compared to her final months in my parents' chaotic household. During our weekly visits, Catherine often apologized for not defending me sooner against Patricia and Robert's exploitation. "I should have spoken up," she said, holding my hand in her small apartment's sitting area. "I watched you work yourself to exhaustion taking care of all of us, and I said nothing when they criticized you." "You weren't responsible for their behavior," I assured her. "I'm just glad you're getting the care you deserve now." Catherine had become an advocate for my independence, telling anyone who'd listen about my years of sacrifice and my courage in choosing self-respect over family manipulation. Her support meant more than any vindication from Patricia or Robert could have provided. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, nearly 10 months after I'd left home. The envelope was addressed in Patricia's careful handwriting, thick paper, suggesting multiple pages inside. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter was indeed multiple pages handwritten on flowered stationery. I remembered from Patricia's desk drawer. The tone was completely different from her previous communication attempts, lacking manipulation or demands for my return. "Dear Emma," it began. "Your father and I have been attending counseling sessions through the county social services program, and our therapist has helped us understand things we never saw clearly before. We want you to know that we recognize how badly we treated you, and we're genuinely sorry." The letter went on to detail their financial recovery efforts. Robert had found steady employment with a commercial landscaping company, working as a crew supervisor and earning consistent wages with health benefits. Patricia was training as a medical office assistant through a community college program, preparing for stable employment in healthcare administration. They'd learned to manage their own finances, create budgets, and live within their means without external subsidies. The tiny apartment had forced them to simplify their possessions and expenses dramatically. Robert wrote that he'd discovered the relief of being an employee rather than struggling to manage a business he'd never understood operationally. "We realize now that you weren't living off us," Patricia wrote. "We were living off you financially and practically. You kept our entire lives running while we criticized you for existing. We understand why you left, and we respect your decision to stay away." The letter concluded without requesting reconciliation or assistance. Instead, they wished me happiness and success in my independent life, acknowledging that they needed to rebuild their relationship with each other and learn to function as adults without my invisible management. I read the letter 3 times, feeling a complex mixture of validation, sadness, and cautious hope. The acknowledgement I'd craved for years had finally arrived, though it no longer felt essential for my well-being. I'd already found peace through my own growth and success. I didn't respond immediately to the letter. Instead, I tucked it into my desk drawer and continued building my life according to my own values and priorities. Forgiveness, I'd learned, was a process that couldn't be rushed or demanded. 2 months later, David proposed during a weekend trip to Hocking Hills State Park, presenting a vintage Art Deco ring that reflected my personal style perfectly. The proposal was thoughtful and romantic, conducted privately, without family drama or external pressure. "I want to build a life with someone who knows her own worth," he said as we stood beside a waterfall in the state park. "You've taught me what true partnership looks like." I said yes immediately, not because I needed marriage for completion, but because I wanted to share my strong, independent life with someone who appreciated and supported my authentic self. The engagement party was held at my condominium with Sarah as my maid of honor and Marcus Walsh offering a toast about my professional excellence and personal growth. Grandmother Catherine attended in her wheelchair, beaming with pride and joy at my happiness. Patricia and Robert weren't invited not out of cruelty, but because I wasn't ready to risk the peace I'd built. Perhaps, someday, we might rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect rather than exploitation, but that remained a distant possibility rather than an immediate goal. Standing in my living room, surrounded by friends and colleagues who valued my contributions and supported my choices, I reflected on the journey from invisible servant to confident professional. The woman who'd been called a leech for subsidizing her family's existence had become someone who invested in her own future and thrived independently. My life lesson had emerged clearly through months of boundary setting and self-advocacy. Self-worth couldn't depend on others' recognition or appreciation. Helping people who refused to help themselves only enabled their dysfunction and prevented their growth. Sometimes loving someone meant refusing to rescue them from consequences they needed to experience. The leech they'd thrown out had actually been their lifeline, but losing her had forced them to develop skills they should have possessed years earlier. Just as leaving had forced me to value myself in ways I'd never learned while constantly serving others. As I looked toward a future filled with graduate school completion, career advancement, marriage to a supportive partner, and relationships based on mutual respect rather than need, I knew that walking away from exploitation had been the best decision I'd ever made. The woman who'd once been invisible had finally learned to see herself clearly, and what she saw was worth protecting, nurturing, and celebrating. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where helping others was actually holding you back from your own growth? I'd love to hear your thoughts about setting boundaries with family members who don't appreciate your contributions. What would you have done in Emma's situation? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more family revenge stories. Share this with anyone who might need encouragement to value themselves more, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone else's dysfunction. Thank you for watching, and I hope you find the courage to protect your own worth, just like Emma did.